Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Anna. Um, and thank you all, both of you who spoke before me. This will be a very different talk. It's sort of, because this is not my field of study, and I haven't really been involved with ecology and things like that for a long time. But I do know a lot about Jewish life in Norway, and I know something about Judaism, and I'll try and, my thought is to weave it together and to give a kind of a, what shall I say, a down-to-earth approach of what this is. So to introduce myself is that I, following the worldwide attention on nature and ecology, then there were also formed in the late 1980s and 1990s, early 1990s, there were formed interreligious dialogue groups in Norway on nature, ecology, and religion. And I was participating in actually a few such groups, representing at that time the Jewish community of Oslo. And some years ago, both before and after I was ordained as a rabbi, which actually was not in 2009, but 2010. But anyway, I used to open my home in Oslo to egalitarian services, which was the only ones of that kind in Norway, followed by Shabbat and festive meals. And the practice was that each bring food made with fish, milk products, grains, fruits, vegetables, but no meat or shellfish, to share in what I would call eco-kosher potluck meals. To these gatherings would come people from different backgrounds and religions, and all could eat together. And these gatherings were founded on the spirit of what is termed deep ecumenism and eco-kosher, terms that I will come back to. And these I had learned from Rabbi Zalman Schachter Shalomi, who was the rabbi who kind of formed this movement called Aleph Jewish Renewal, under which I'm ordained. And so I will also be referring to him as Reb Zalman during this talk, because he has many teachings addressing issues on nature, ecology, and Judaism today. So the picture you're seeing is actually, so I just want to go first. So in the Jewish community of Norway, nature and ecology as such is not a dominant focus. I mean, that's what I'm leading into now, is to explain how small the community is here. It's not growing or like it is in America and other parts of the world, where there are several things happening also in Israel on ecology and Judaism, but not here. So in this talk, I will focus on the history of Jewish life in Norway and how nature and ecology in general can be seen as inherent elements of Jewish practice and life. That Judaism is very much connected to nature and ecology and rests on an indigenous bedrock. So the backdrop of this slide is from the Royal Castle Gardens in Oslo on what's called May 17th, which is the Norwegian National Day. It's a day when the citizens of Norway celebrate with flags and parades. And this photo is from this parade. You can see, so the parade is made out of school children who have their orchestras going first, and they have banners and flags. And basically what you're seeing here is parents and such watching on, and in the background you have the palace where the royal family are waving to the children. So the 17th of May is a strong symbol of what it means to be Norwegian. So that's why I brought it forth. Many wear their national costumes on this day. And the holiday is a symbol of Norwegian sovereignty and independence. It's also a celebration of spring in Norway. After many months of winter, outdoor life. Is there something wrong with my sound? Somebody's talking in the background here.
I'm sorry, I don't think it's you, Lynn. I think it may be someone else.
Okay.
I'll just make sure. Sorry, please go ahead.
Yes. So it's a strong symbol of what it means to be Norwegian. And many also wear their national costumes on this day. So like I said, it's a symbol of Norwegian sovereignty and independence, and spring. So outdoor life is again enhanced and enjoyed. So this is, I'm bringing this up because it's connected to what does it mean to be Jewish in Norway. This is the setting. But Jewish in Norway starts with Jewish adjustment to modernity in Europe through the 1800s, because it's a result of that. And throughout the 1800s, as Jews gradually were given citizenship in democratic nations and leaving the shtetls and ghettos, the transition from living in close-knit traditional communities under the authority of a local rabbi or a council of elders, and then also in increasingly hostile environments, one of the reasons that many left. With this shift, what it means to be Jewish changes too, accommodating to societal structures that rest upon the ideals of emancipation and enlightenment, and an underlying Christian culture. And as Jews, there are many adjustments that Jews willingly adjust to these new situations, and Jewish practice moves from religious to culture for many. And at this time, there's also a vast immigration to America, to Western Europe, and so on from the eastern parts of Europe. And so again, we're back to 17th of May. So this is, hold on a second, my pages, I have to find my right page here. So what is this being Jewish in Norway? So in 1814, Norway is freed from Denmark. And the second paragraph of the Norwegian constitution says that Jews and Jesuits are prohibited from entering the kingdom. This was amended for Jews in 1851 as a result of the laborious work of poet Henrik Wergeland, and actually for Jesuits only in 1956. That's another story. And the first Jewish communities were first established in the early 1890s, a little bit more than 100 years ago. So this is the grave of Henrik Wergeland, who died in 1840. One second, he died a few years before the law was amended, but he fought all his life as a humanist for the rights of Jews to be accepted into Norway and for this paragraph to be abolished. Apparently, his father had been part of those who had made the constitutions and was partly responsible for having this line there, which was also part of the culture in Europe at the time. So it wasn't something that was out of the blue, but anyhow, this explains how being Jewish in Norway has a special background. So here is a youth from the Jewish community who has held a speech and puts a wreath on Henrik Wergeland's grave on the 17th of May, early in the morning. So Jews gather every 17th of May on this national day, and then afterwards the national anthem is sung. So this grave itself has like a bust of Henrik Wergeland, and this whole monument was founded by Jews in Sweden, because Norway did not accept Jews at that time when he died. So it's money from Swedish Jews that made this, that kind of paid for this grave. Anyhow, so how did Jews come to Norway? As you can see, from 1852, when the law was amended, until 1880, only 24 individuals came, mainly from Germany. Businessmen, a few businessmen with their families. Several of them didn't even stay. Then from 1880 to 1920, you have the main body of immigration. Also, my family came to Norway in the early 1890s. But only about 1,200 individuals, all arriving from Eastern Europe, from the Baltic states, Poland, Russia, Pale of Settlement. And then in between 33 and 40, during the Nazi rule, you have 350 refugees that were accepted to come from the European continent. Yeah. And here are some pictures from before the war, where you see Norwegian Jews enjoying nature. I mean, living in Norway means that you partake in nature at all seasons. And you can see here that that's also true for Norwegian Jews. They would often make gatherings connected to the Jewish holidays in a kind of natural setting and make it sort of like a synthesis between Norwegian and Jewish, which is not an unusual thing for Jews to do. So, the Norwegian Holocaust made a deep impact on all Jewish life in Norway, and its shadow can still be sensed today. On April 9th, 1940, Nazi Germany occupied Norway, and at that time there were about 1,800 registered Jews, including 350 refugees from Europe. Between 42, I mean, some were arrested even earlier, men in particular, but in 1942, men, women, and children were arrested and deported to Auschwitz. 776 Jews in all, only 35 men survive. Women, children, and elderly were killed upon arrival in Auschwitz, and of them, many from my family also. So this is something that I have grown up with. Apparently 1,452 Jews escaped from Norway, mostly to Sweden, a few to England, I think also maybe some to the USA. The disparity of numbers, I think it's because not all Jews were registered in 1940, so those were the registered Jews. And the Jews who returned in 1945 from Sweden were predominantly women and children, because the men had been arrested earlier and some of the women then escaped while not waiting for their husbands, or, you know, because their husbands were sent. After the war, there was a quota of Jewish refugees who came, and they were called actually quota Jews, to fill in the Jewish quota of the deceased Jews. They came and settled in Norway after the war. Not so many of them stayed on. And the number of registered Jews in Norway has never exceeded the figures from 1940. And I think that's important to hold in mind, that it's a very, very small Jewish population here. And post-Shoah, and this is a monument. Oh yes, I forgot to show you that this, if you can see the picture underneath the text, it's these memorial stones, which are actually today, some more are being put down. So the plan is to put memorial stones for every single one of these 776 Jews who lived in Norway outside where they used to live. So post-Shoah, post-Holocaust, Jewish in Norway. So after the war, there were 2 synagogues that were re-established. Before the war, there had also been a second synagogue in Oslo. The one in Oslo is today, was and always was Orthodox. And the one in Trondheim has recently become conservative, but both were actually Orthodox to begin with. Like I said before, some immigration to Israel and other countries after the war, when Israel was established. And from the 1970s and onwards, there were Jews arriving from Israel, the US, and elsewhere to settle in Norway, some through marriage, some through study, and so on. And also you have a certain amount of Jews who converted, either through marriage or in other ways. But in 2020, today, there are actually less than 1,400 or 1,500 Jews that are members of the 2 Jewish communities. I think actually this is probably too many still. And most members identify as cultural Jews rather than religiously observant. And the 2 Jewish museums, one in Oslo, one in Trondheim, have become places of belonging and contribute to sharing knowledge on Judaism and Jewish culture in general. So they've also become places where people feel like they can connect Jewishly, but culturally rather than religiously. So Jewish is often connected to eating kosher. And so what is Jewish and kosher in Norway? Since 1939, kosher slaughter was prohibited in Norway. And even today, frozen kosher meat is imported and sold through the community center. And as I said, the Jewish community in Oslo keeps Orthodox standards, both in rituals and community kitchen. And kosher is upheld in varying degrees in homes and daily life. But for some, keeping kosher means omitting meat and going either pescatarian, vegetarian, or vegan. And generally speaking, ecological awareness is growing rapidly in Norway. But after the war, following the deep impact of Shoah on all Jews who returned to live in Norway, keeping a strictly kosher diet was discontinued, whilst before the war, many more would have a kosher, keep strict kosher and live traditionally. But there were other aspects of life that was more pressing to begin with. But keeping kosher in Norway, since kosher meat is hard to get by, means eating a diet predominantly made of fish, grains, milk products, fruit, and vegetables. Prefabricated food is only kosher if the production has been overseen by a rabbi. And there's little of this to be found in Norway. Thus, eating kosher here means making food from scratch. So in many respects, observant Norwegian Jews eat far less prefabricated foods than Norwegians in general. And in the community, or people who belong to the community, kosher is upheld in varying degrees. I mean, everything from not eating pork to keeping strict kosher at home. Both in homes and daily life. And for some Jews, especially, like I said, keeping kosher means omitting meat altogether, because then you don't, first of all, there is an ecological awareness related to that, but it's also practical that you don't have to have two sets of dishes and all this that has to do with keeping a kosher home. Okay. So, practical wisdom. Jewish life begins with practical wisdom. The word kosher actually means fit or appropriate. Like what is the right way to prepare a chicken or to bake a bread? What works best? What is most sustaining? So kosher is about putting practical knowledge into systems. And my teacher, Rabbi Zalman Schachter Shalomi, suggests that this way of thinking is contrary to the way people usually think what kosher is. Most often it is explained through what is permitted and what the law demands. And if there first was this idea and someone said, let's make it kosher, and then we'll decide what is kosher and what is not. But I really concur with Reb Zalman that when he says that, I don't think it happened that way. It happened that we did it first, and then came the systems after. I think that's important to keep in mind also when we think religions in general. But anyhow, with Judaism, it seems very so. So here is a stylized calendar of the Jewish year. This is a picture from the Jewish Museum here. So the Jewish calendar is an organic calendar and is also perceived as a holy calendar. It's essential to Jewish ritual practice. Most Jewish practices are connected to the agricultural season of Israel, or ancient Israel and the Middle East. Celebrating and praying for good crops, when to harvest, for rain, and so on. And the calendar can be seen as a dance between the lunar cycles and the solar year, organically connecting ritual life to the natural cycles in nature in the northern hemisphere. Each new moon commences a new month. Deciding the actual time of the new moon was no small deal in the ancient Israel. Only a priest of highest authority could decide. All other calculations connected to holidays and harvest rested on this. But today, the times are calculated in advance. So by inserting a 13th month every third or fourth year, in all 7 times each 19 years, the lunar year is balanced into the solar year. And major holidays are celebrated either on full moons or new moons. And around the time of the equinoxes, if you can see there, I don't know if you, can you see my arrow? Yeah, yeah. So here you have Pesach, Passover, around Easter, around the spring equinox. And then you have the whole month of Tishrei, which is the whole month of celebration in autumn at the time of autumn equinox. And Sukkot is on full moon, Rosh Hashanah is on new moon, and so on. Yeah. And I think that so if you think of the month, they celebrated the full moon and the new moon. And I think from ancient Babylonia, those days were auspicious days. And then they decided that the quarter moon was also to be celebrated. And voila, you have the 7-day week. And you come to the Shabbat as being then the most holy day of the calendar. Hold on a second. I just wanted to show you the Shabbat is like interspersed through the whole year in the middle here. So the week is crowned by the holiness of Shabbat, the 7th day, when Jewish life has to do with interacting with the natural world and maintaining holy order. And the 7th day, a day to refrain from creating. So it's a custom to put aside food and clothes and things for Shabbat. So like in Orthodox settings, Shabbat is the focal point of the whole week. It's a day to emulate the Garden of Eden and Messianic times and creating holy time. And the scent of an atmosphere of Shabbat sustains throughout the week, ritually enhanced through smelling herbs, which one does then ritually when the Shabbat ends. But Shabbat in Norway is not no small thing. Shabbat begins at sunset Friday evening, but we're living in a country where the sun hardly sets in the summer and sets very early in the winter. So I'm not going to go so quick. I'm going to go quickly through this, but anyhow, it's the times have been officially set by rabbis, but when in 1800 a rabbi was asked about what should Jews do about this in Norway, he said, Jews should not choose to live this far north. End of story. And another way of showing how natural rhythms are so integrated into the way of thinking of the sort of at least the underlying Jewish, especially from the Bible, the 7th day is the day of rest. Then you have Rosh Hashanah, which is actually the 7th month, because the first month starts at spring with the spring equinox. It's like the astrological calendar too. So counting from then, you have the beginning of the 7th month, beginning the 7th month, which is a whole month of rest, beginning with the days of awe, and then continuing with Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, and then followed by Sukkot, the Feast of Harvest, which is also at the full moon of the month, and so on, where you pray for winter rains, and you end with the Feast of the Torah, where the Torah reading begins anew, and the Torahs are taken out and danced with. And then you have the 7th year, which is also, this is from the biblical times, the year of Shemitah, which was originally a time when the fields were laid fallow, was a year to study, and all debts were annulled and slaves were freed. Maybe we should do something like that today. But the whole thing of a sabbatical year comes from this. And then every 50th year, for 7 times 7 years, then after the 49th year, you had the year of the Jubilee, which was when all property was supposed to be returned to its original borders, to emphasize the whole fact that we're stewards. When we don't own the earth, it's God's earth that we are stewards here. So I'm just showing some pictures here. This is the place from Echo Me, which echoes back to the sort of nomadic roots of Judaism. Here you have some people emptying their pockets around the new year. And here you have the 4 species that are held and shook during Sukkot, during the Feast of Tabernacles, and it has a sound like rain. So it has to do with calling in the rain. And here you have different such huts in Norway. Let me see if I can. I think I'm going to, I don't have much time, so I think I'm going to go a bit quickly. But I just want to sort of, so what is halacha, which means the way or the path? The vital question then is, how does one live according to Torah, the teachings, the 5 books of Moses, God's law? Halakha is a continuous conversation between lived life and scripture. And I think that's sort of my guideline in understanding Judaism. And I also see the 630 commandments in the Torah. If you think of the word mitzvah, meaning connection, and there are 365 prohibitions connected to the days of the year and 248 prescriptions connected to the limbs of a human body, one can think of the Torah, the teaching, the 5 books of Moses, as a relationship between time and body. So what if life according to Torah is a life in alignment with all life? And I'm also quoting this text from Shepherd God's translation from Psalm 40, 8-9, that I have come with my whole life written upon me to do your pleasure, my God. My own desire and your Torah are mingled within me. That the more we are in tune with ourselves and with our environment, the more we are. So just to come towards the end here. So Rebbe Zalman Schachter Shalomi introduced the term Jewish paradigm shift, which entails Gaia consciousness, a shared responsibility for each other and for our environment. And with this came concepts such as deep ecumenism, where he's talking about, can we meet each other from different religions on deep spiritual levels, not comparing, but where can we meet? And eco-kosher. Each culture, religion, and human being has a role to play towards co-creating a sustainable world, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. And there's a need to let go of beliefs and traditions that no longer serve this shift. So this is quoting from Zalman Schachter Shalomi. And eco-kosher, which I have mentioned a little bit, seeks to bring kosher into the 21st century. Questions of ethics in relationship to consumption and living on all levels, that it is our responsibility to consider animal welfare, how the earth is treated, how crops are grown, work ethics on all levels, distance and ways of transports in all consumption. That it's our responsibility to do something about it. And also, what utensils do we eat with? Is plastic, which traditionally in Orthodox context is considered kosher, is it also eco-kosher? Can we grow and provide food fit for all people that also is sustainable for the whole planet? And maybe it's better to understand kosher as being on a spectrum rather than an absolute. So this is actually the final picture, just some nature pictures from Norway, just to show that you cannot live in Norway without being integrated with nature. It's just how it is. So these are pictures taken from the Jewish Community magazine, where Jews have been gathered in different Jewish contexts in recent times. So thank you.